Hi, Neil McPherson here, Wirksworth Gunroom. So today we're going to be doing a little feature on the No.4 rifle, the Enfield No.4. Several rifles I've got here, all No.4 Mk.1 star. Now I don't have a No.4 Mk.1 to compare them with, but we'll be going over some of the details all the same. So first of all, let me show you these are all clear. Hopefully you can see in them. Key thing with the Enfield is that once you've got the bolt open, unlike some rifles, it is actually quite easy to see in. Hopefully the camera can see in those too. There's another. And finally this sporterised one, which is my personal deer stalking rifle. So, in the unlikely event that there's anybody who is unfamiliar with the Enfield rifle in general, or the No.4 in particular, I'll just give you a few brief details on it. The Enfield was introduced as a follow-on to the Lee Metford in the 1890s. There were various models through the First World War. I'm not going to cover all the detail of that because we could be here forever. But prior to the Second World War, a improved version was designed, the No.4 Mk.1. And the No.4 Mk.1 was didn't really go into production to any extent because there were probably other priorities. But when it was really brought into production, it was done from Lend-Lease, and a great deal were manufactured in North America, both by Savage in the United States. This is a Savage example, hence it being marked US property, which you may be able to see there. And also by the Canadian Long Branch Arsenal, who made a number of them. And three of these here are made by Savage, and one is by Long Branch. Now, when Savage started making them, they were looking for some improvements, and improvements not so much to the rifle's performance, but what can we do to improve production rates, and what can we do to simplify it. So this is how the No.4 Mk.1 star came about, and the star, the asterisk on the marking, indicates something that's modified, slight modification from the original model. That's across all British nomenclature of arms and all sorts of equipment. So the things they did were they deleted the spring catch that was here, so that instead, to remove the bolt, they just put a notch, which to my mind is actually a great improvement over the spring catch. You think, oh, that might come out. Never known it happen. Also, they took away the nice rear sight, which was all machined, and you could wind up and down and adjust to any range you wanted, and they replaced it with this two-position rear sight, which gives you battle range 200-300 yards, and you can flick it up to 600, beyond which you can't see people anyway. So that's what they thought they would do there. The other really interesting development that occurred with these is something that you tend not to see nowadays, and it's not uncommon to the bolts won't have changed if these rifles are still knocking about. That's going to be the same. They've quite often had the rear sights replaced with the rear sight it would have had if there wasn't a war on, because a lot of these were factory thorough repaired after the war. Second World War, you'll see them marked up FTR. Significantly this one isn't, but we'll come to that in a moment. Now, one of the other things that they did was, how can we make a barrel and do less work on it? Well, you've got to drill a hole, cut rifle in grooves, profile it, thread it, put all the little features on that the bayonet's going to attach and so on. Well, it needs all those, doesn't it? But what had been some research done in the US to see whether they could reduce the number of grooves in the rifling, and I believe it was Remington had actually developed this, possibly in discussion with the Springfield Armoury. Anyway, what they did was they just didn't cut so many grooves. So proper Enfield rifling is 5 groove, and a load of these were made with just 2. And if you look down them, you think, well, that's shot out. It's all smooth. I can barely see any grooves. But in fact, it's not the case. And there was some evidence. Did see a report. I think it was Remington. Maybe look it up. But the 2 groove barrels were actually tended to be slightly more accurate than the 5-groove barrels, and so there's no reason that you shouldn't find one of these that shoots okay, but we'll come to that later. Anyway, in British service, 5-groove barrel was the standard, so again, if they were factory thorough repaired, they'd have a 5-groove barrel fitted. So it's very rare, I've only seen 2, that's these 2, that have still got a 2-groove barrel, and the reason in this case is that they went to the Union of South Africa, and they are marked with a U for Union of South Africa. They didn't have the same factory thorough repair scheme post-war that we did here in the UK, so these still retain those original features. Now I've got 2 of them. They've both got 2-groove barrels, they've both got the bolt cut out because you can't really change that. One has got its original rear sight, and the other has had the what's known as the Singer sight. Don't know the details on that. I think presumably the Singer sewing machine manufacturer perhaps turned those out. Don't know, but we can look into that. I'm sure somebody will be able to tell us. So one's had the later sight. Otherwise, they're both pretty standard. Brass butt plate. Now that has a little trapdoor, and the trapdoor can be easily opened, and there you can keep your cleaning materials, oil bottle, pull through, flannelette, wire gauze on the pull through, only to be used when instructed. You've got generally on these a walnut stock. British examples tend to have beech, and post-war ones have been refurbished with beech, but Savage generally made them with American walnut, to the best of my knowledge. It's a 2-part stock, as per all of these Enfields. That fastens into this socket, and then the rifle is bedded here. We have a detachable magazine, not really used as a detachable magazine in service because these are loaded with charges, which you'll come to see. But detachable magazine holds 10 rounds, so twice the capacity of the typical bolt-action rifle of the period. The fantastically fast Lee action. We have here the safety catch. Moving forward, you've got top wood here, and some service rifles didn't have this. I think you'll find that if you're shooting the opposition, then you might actually get your fingers burnt. With the Enfield, not a problem, because you've got nice handguard, and on these they're all grooved, so that gives good finger grip there. Sling swivel here, this one seems to have gone slightly adrift, don't know what's up there. Front band, no piling swivel, none of that, all gone. Quite a chunky sight protector. The foresight is well protected in there. To adjust the foresight, there is a special screw on the front, and then it can be drifted left and right. And finally we have the bayonet fittings here. Now the bayonet is a spike bayonet. There were various iterations of this. The first one was a sort of cruciform section, and then somebody must have realised, well, if you're only going to use a sharpened screwdriver, then you might as well just have a round one, and it should just clip. Oh, that's a bit stiff. There we go. And there is your spike bayonet, which is nothing like they had in the First World War and older ones, and there was a general trend in bayonets to get shorter and shorter. So in summary, it's pretty much like any other Lee Enfield rifle. Fantastic Lee bolt, 10 round magazine, charger loading. Okay, we know the very early ones didn't have that, but typically through most of the period that they were used, these are common features. The number 4 had this heavier barrel, and than the previous short magazine Lee Enfields, and should be a bit of a better target shooting rifle. Okay, so now we've had a quick look over it and just seen some of the differences here. you may be able to just gather that some sunlight streaming in here, and it's a gorgeous day, and really, why stand here wittering about it when we can take these out, go and shoot them on the range. So, let's go. Of course, it's not easy to find a rifle range that you can take over to shoot and film trials, but we're going just a short distance through the Derbyshire countryside to Yeaveley Estate near Ashbourne. The Yeaveley Estate's best known for its regular clay pigeon shoots, but it also has a very useful 100-metre rifle range, and that's what we'll be using today. So, here we are on the lovely range at Yeaveley, care of Guy Field, who runs the place. There's a clay shoot going on in the background, Ladies' Day. We also have this 100-metre-ish range. I think it's 110 metres. And here are the rifles we're just going to shoot today. So they're all No.4 Mk.1 stars, varying degrees of configuration from the original. That's pretty much as Savage made them. It's got the 2-position sight, 2-groove barrel. Now the barrel on that example is very badly worn. It's really shot out, so I'm not hoping that that's going to be really that representative. Next one up is still a 2-groove barrel, but it's had the correct Singer sight that it would have had on as per the original specification. That's been replaced at a later date, so that's a finer sight for shooting. Next up we have another No.4 Mk.1 star. This has been factory thorough repaired, which was a scheme run. Basically they put them back in the armouries and brought them up to standard, so that involved putting on the original type vernier sight and also a 5-groove barrel. This is my personal rifle. Here goes the clays again. So if you can still hear me, this is also a No.4 Mk.1 star. It's by one branch. This has been rebarreled with a 5-groove barrel and has had sporterised woodwork fitted, telescopic sight mount fitted properly, not one of those clip-on little brackets, and this is my deer stalking rifle. It does retain a 200-yard flip-up backside, which is this, but cut down slightly. You can see I've also got ammunition. This is in an original Radway green bandolier. It's actually this post-war bandolier. It's got Privy Partisan current production factory ammunition in conventional charges. I've not polished the charges or anything, and we may have some hang-ups with some of those. Also here you see I've got some 37 pattern webbing. Now you may see this is slightly different. This is doesn't have the big ammunition pouches for the Bren guns. I just put this set together for if I'm doing civilian service rifle competition, that sort of thing, because I don't get to have a Bren gun for that. Also here, the 37 pattern haversack, the small pack, and some fantastic items in here because it's been quite a long day already, and time for a bit of refreshment with some authentic Second World War type, oh no, I've just brought curry and some tea. Boy, am I ready for this. Forgot the fork. So first off, the No.4 Mk.1 star, 2-position rear sight, very shot out 2-groove barrel. Just to pick the most uneven bit of ground possible. Still, field conditions almost. Right hand target. Ear defenders.
Now you may notice that that round has just made a rather large hole in the target, and this is because, unbeknownst to me at the time I was shooting, that shot out barrel was not stabilising the rounds and they were tumbling and going sideways through the target. Another effect of this was that the rounds were no longer supersonic. Now at this stage in the video you're hearing the soundtrack from the 2 cameras at the firing point as well as the 3rd camera downrange. So I'll turn off the first 2 soundtracks and then you'll hear just what it sounds like at the point of the target, and listen carefully to the report of the rifle over the next few shots. And so I continued, happily turning live rounds into empty cases, blissfully unaware that they were all going into the target sideways.
So next up, the No.4 Mk.1 star, retrofitted with the original type sight that it would have had if it wasn't a star. And this is 2-groove barrel and quite reasonable bore on this, quite good, so we'll see if it makes any difference. Something I have found with some of these chargers, if they're not ones you use all the time, and I've got a load in packaging, in original packaging, and they are often really sticky. Go on. Never happens. What would broke on the range say? Also note it wouldn't clear.
left-hand target.
Let's turn off the sound from the firing point so that you can hear the crack and thump of a proper supersonic round as it comes in. Even at a distance of just 110 metres, there is a noticeable delay between the crack of the bullet passing the camera and the report from the muzzle of the rifle.
I think this is a somewhat iffy mag on this one. Come on. Okay, rifle clear.
So noticeable with that, this doesn't really give a more refined aperture, but did seem to give a nicer sight picture, perhaps because it's got a bit more black around it. This has got a better trigger than the first one. That was quite noticeable. Almost like a single stage trigger on the first one, so that was an improvement. Otherwise, yeah, magazine seems a bit sticky, gave a few problems and snags which could clear, but we'll have to take a look at it. I don't know if it's got a dent in it or something. It's had a number stamped in it, perhaps a bit over enthusiastically. Right, onwards and upwards. So here we are down at the targets, and the one with the shot out barrel that was fired first, as you can see, bullets are just tumbling all over the place, so that's either going to need another barrel or well, another barrel really. Don't deactivate stuff here. Now looking across at the second one, so this is the 2-groove barrel, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Is there another? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Probably one off the edge. And that's a 10-round group of 8 inches. Shocking. Absolutely shocking. So we'll change the targets over, see what we can do with the next two. So next up is my personal No.4. This is again No.4 Mk.1 Star, a Savage. It's been factory thorough reconditioned at Fazakerley, and so it's got 5-groove barrel. That has been replaced since, to be fair, but it has only been replaced with another 5-groove barrel. It's got the vernier sights, which I'll make a good point of starting down at suitable range for the 100 here, and generally doesn't give any problems with feeding, so we shall see if we can replicate the previous issue.
Shooting on the left-hand target.
So now's probably as good a time as any to have a look at the targets and discuss the target that we're using. This is the figure 11, common military target in the UK, and like most military targets dating back even to the period of the Boer War or shortly after, it doesn't have a distinct aiming mark. It's intended for field firing. Therefore, unless you're using a telescopic sight, in which case the wrist of the soldier forms a good aiming mark, it's rather indistinct, and with iron sights at this sort of range, even 110 metres, you don't have the precision that you would if you're aiming at a smaller mark or something more distinct such as a black roundel on a white target.
Short stroke it. No. Only put one charge in it. Do it.
The effect of this lack of a detailed and positive aiming mark is to open up your group size, and as you've seen with the previous one, with the 2-groove barrel, we find much the same when I come to have a look at the results with this.
So that's my one, a bit more familiar with it. I managed to forget that I put 5 rounds in instead of 10, but otherwise no snags, hang-ups. Lovely trigger on this, but then I did fiddle with it a lot. And nice sight picture, we shall see. Okay, so now we have my deer stalking rifle, once again, No.4 Mk.1 star. This has had a 5-groove barrel. This came to me as I probably mentioned before, sporterized, shot out, horrible woodwork. I put on a standard military barrel, standard sights. I took off the wiggly wobbly scope mounting and machined one up and silver soldered it in. Never got around to rebluing it. And it's got a PCAR 4-10 scope on, which clearly is going to make quite a bit of a difference in being able to see the target. Whether it helps me hit the target adequately remains to be seen. And I did consider taking the scope off and trialling this like for like with the others using the iron sight, and decided I couldn't be bothered. So here we are. We're just going to try this, and maybe this will stand as a benchmark for the others. I hope so. Whilst charger feeding is still possible with this, it would entail taking the scope off, which I'm not going to be doing.
As I mentioned before, this is my actual deer stalking rifle, and most of my deer stalking has been done in Scotland. It's commonly thought that 303 isn't a deer legal round in Scotland because of the velocity limit of 2,450 feet per second, which is slightly higher than the standard velocity for military service rifle ammunition of 2,440. In fact, these two numbers are related. The limit was brought in to discourage people or prevent them from using military rifles, and this was before the time that expanding ammunition was required. Of course, military ball ammunition wouldn't be permitted now in any case. If you're hand loading or you're using commercial ammunition, it's quite easy to get over to 2,450, so there's not really a problem. 303 with expanding ammunition is more than capable of taking any deer anywhere in the United Kingdom.
Hold that one. Couple more. Okay, rifle clear. Okay, so we'll go and see how that's done. That's 10 rounds out of that. We've got the peak hole scope on 10 power. I've shot this on the same target that we used for the first sample, which was the one with the shot out bore, because if there's any more holes going sideways, then this is getting an axe through it. But I think we should be able to tell the difference. So let's go and have a look. So here are the next two examples. On the left, No.4 iron sight. This is my own one. And on the right with the scope. And one pulled, I think a called one. And also a bit of horizontal spread there. Almost certainly me. So let's just take the ruler to it. Body of the group again, sort of 7 inches. If you take the whole lot, probably stretching it to about 8. So actually quite comparable really to the 2 groove. And with the scope, yeah, well, I'd expect to be able to shoot a bit better with the scope. I think I did actually move position a bit, so maybe that accounts for that split group. I pulled one for sure, and probably ought to spend more time on the range. So, taken all in all, what can we conclude from that? Possibly not a great deal. Shot out barrels send bullets sideways, so we know that needs some work. The difference between the 2 groove and the 5 groove, not really significant. I would say the 2 groove's in fairly good condition. You know, I'd be quite happy with it. And group size, yeah, it seems to show a bit of vertical stringing, but you know, really it wasn't quite centered, but seemed to be pretty comparable to how I shot today with the 5 groove. So maybe not a lot in that, and I think, you know, it's an argument. People don't dismiss 2 groove barrels, they can be perfectly good. With a scope on, then yeah, the same rifle package is going to be a lot easier to shoot with, certainly with 10 power. And as said, I need to spend less time in the shop and more time on the range. If you have any questions or interest in any of these, then let us know. If you can do all that sort of Facebooky, likey, sharey, subscribey stuff, great. And hope to see you next time. Thanks a lot. Bye. And as luck would have it, Guy's turned up with the pickup. Happy to have a ride. Absolutely.
Now here we have the challenge of holding on and holding the camera. So good day on the clay shoot today?
Very good, yes. We've had a ladies' day for BASC. Well attended, 30 ladies with flush afterwards. 6 instructors. We had a very, very good day, and the weather's been absolutely kind to us.
It's been glorious up here.
Yeah.
Got quite a bit done on the range. Interesting results. Some as expected, some maybe not quite as expected.
Right.
But we can work on those as we go on. Hope to be doing a few bits more up here.
Splendid. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go lock my guns away, and then I'm going to adjourn
to the Yeaveley Arms.
Well, the Yeaveley Arms does seem a reasonable option considering I'm rather thirsty as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think, like you say, lock them up and neck them down.
Absolutely.
Cheers!
Bye bye.
Cheers.
Cheers, big ears.